Hello, everybody. Welcome to MHTV. We've got a really interesting episode for you tonight. Something that's very important for us to be talking very openly about. Before we get started, let me hand you over to Dave, though, so he can tell you how you can join in with us tonight. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Nicky. Hi, everyone. As always, there's a few different ways you can join in tonight. The first of them is on our Facebook Live feed. Head to the right. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them in the chat. The other option you've got is over on X. If you want to do a post, all you just need to do is make sure you include the hashtag MHTV, and I'll be there tonight, hopefully putting some interesting links that are shared and any info that we can that way as well. But without further ado, straight back to you, Nicky.
Okay, let's introduce our fantastic guest, Dr. Chelcie Jewitt. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, so thanks for having me. So my name is Chelcie Jewitt. Clinically, I'm an emergency medicine registrar working up in the Northwest Merseyside region. I am still I am working. I've just come back off maternity leave, so I'm still a bit rusty in that department. But I'm also one of the founders of Surviving in Scrubs, which is sort of what we're going to be talking about today, kind of what our campaign is and things. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about, what the issue is. Why was this initiative needed?
Sure. So Surviving in Scrubs is a campaign organisation that's been set up by myself and my friend and colleague, Dr. Becky Cox. She's an academic GP down in Oxford. And it focuses around the experiences of staff members at work who've experienced sexual misconduct in some shape or form from other colleagues working in healthcare. And this was started, so we launched our campaign in June, July 22. And that was off the back of Becky getting into contact with me because I did a piece of work with the BMA called the Sexism and Medicine Survey. And this report looked at the experiences of doctors and the sexism that they'd experienced in work, primarily from other colleagues, but also patients, etc. as well. And that came out of my own experience. I'd experienced sexism, misogyny, sexual harassment, and unfortunately sexual assault at work from colleagues. And Becky has similar stories as well. And we got talking, and the conversation was being had by the BMA, by the Royal College of Surgeons at that time. But then nothing was really happening. No changes were being made. So we thought, what could we do? And that's where Surviving in Scrubs has come from. Some people think because we've got Scrubs in the title that we're focused around surgeons, but we're not. We chose our name because we were coming out of the pandemic and everyone was wearing scrubs. Everyone in healthcare was wearing scrubs, and that's what our campaign is about. It's about everyone in healthcare. So on our website, survivinginscrubs.co.uk, anyone who works in healthcare can anonymously submit their testimonies, their stories, their truth of what's happened to them at work. And so far, I think we've got 213 on there. And they're from doctors, they're from nurses, they're from physios, from students, from admin staff, anyone that works in healthcare, from any specialty. So we've got mental health on there, we've got emergency medicine, we've got surgery, we've got general practice, we've got pediatrics, we've got all specialties and all over the country. And with this collective narrative that Becky and I have established on our website, it's enabled us to get into some pretty impressive rooms. So we've been talking to Royal Colleges, NHS England, Scotland, Wales, the GMC, other regulators. We've actually got a meeting with most regulators tomorrow actually to talk about this issue. And yeah, really drive change, policy and education being the main things that we're trying to make a difference with.
Do you think there's something particular about the settings, the health setting, or do you think it's just a generic social problem?
Great question. I think this is a societal issue. So sexism, sexual misconduct it is a social issue. You can look at other sectors, Met Police, law, media, and you can see that this is happening everywhere.
Yeah.
In terms of in healthcare, so we actually published our first report in November last year, where we did a thematic analysis of 150 of the stories on our website. And we did find that there were some particular elements of working in healthcare that predisposed or were unique, in that we found that there's a lot of the hierarchy of medicine plays into this, and the settings of one-on-one working, for example in the paramedic sector, you know, they're very often one-on-one in an ambulance, puts people at more risk. And we've also found that, you know, there's also the impact on patients as well, which shows that there's a wider circle of kind of a ripple effect around these behaviours as well. So we found that there's some unique elements to healthcare. But yes, I do think it is a societal issue.
And is it something that you're hearing reported across all, sort of like even new starters are having this experience, or is it something that is, you know, you having it very much top-down behaviour, or is it happening just generally wherever there's an opportunity?
So we know that from the data that's out there, we know that the majority of perpetrators are higher up in the medical hierarchy, in the healthcare hierarchy. So it's not just doctors, it's other allied health professions too. But we work closely with quite a few universities, and we know that students coming through are experiencing this whilst they are students, not only whilst on clinical placements, but from other students as well. So it's not going away. We know that it's changing. So we know the harassment through social media, the internet, WhatsApp. We know that this is a newer issue that's coming through. And it's sad. It's awful. It's awful to hear, because you think and you hope and you want the generations that come behind you to have it better than you have. And I think in some aspects, the fact that we're talking about this now, so we're only talking, this conversation's only been out in the open for the past 5, 10, 15 years, but we know that these behaviours have been going on since the dawn of time. Everyone that works in healthcare either has their own story or they know someone who has a story.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting because obviously, guys, we shouldn't talk behind your back, but before we got started tonight, we're having a little bit of a conversation, and we're talking about our experiences. So when I first started off as a student, absolutely I encountered it all the way up probably to becoming a ward manager, and then above that level it changed for me. And I think partly that is because I got older and less hot, frankly. Like, the NHS really did for me on that. But also I think I became in a position where I had the experience to sort of, and the power behind me to do something about it and be less attractive as a target. And I think that was something I'd like to sort of pick your brains about, Chelsea, and see if there's anything that resonates with your findings at all.
So from my own personal experience, I think the sexism that I've experienced at work has changed. I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that I'm known for speaking up about this. I'm known as an angry feminist, which people want to insult me with, but I'm a feminist and I'm angry a lot of the time. So yeah, fair point. It's on the nose. Yeah. I think there was a lot more kind of threats and intimidation when I was younger, when I was in F1, F2. There was a lot of humiliation earlier on. Now I see a lot of my junior colleagues questioning me a lot more than they do my male colleagues when it comes to my clinical decision making. A lot of people assuming I'm more junior than I am because I am the female in the room. So I see a lot of that. That's kind of like my daily experiences. and recently, having been off on maternity and being pregnant at work, there was a lot of comments about that weren't necessarily obvious, but they made me feel uncomfortable. And they just don't happen. They just don't happen to men. A lot of, about me being lazy. I was doing nights at 32 weeks pregnant. I'm not lazy. I know, just those kind of things. In terms of the data that we see, we know that the more junior people are, the more likely they are to experience any of these behaviours, but also particularly more violent end of the spectrum. We know when there is that power imbalance. So if there is a supervisor and a trainee, that the trainee again is at risk. And anecdotally, we hear in terms of kind of the different ages of women, that things change. We know that the reproductive threat of younger women is assumed, and then that's sort of like what this sexism and the attitudes and the behaviors focus on. And then you get to the other end of the spectrum where women are sort of near retirement age, and they're thought of as dragons or battle axes, and there's a lot of joking about that. There's a lot of pushback of women in leadership for similar kind of stereotypes as well, which is awful and really upsetting. I'd like to say that it's getting better, and I think it is. I've only been, how long have I been qualified for? Oh God, nearly 10 years. Oh God, that's gone quick. And in that time, I think things have changed, because there's a lot more representation of women in leadership positions, whether that be through nursing, allied health professions, or medicine. It's not equal, and we're a long way off equal, but I do think it is getting better.
I think the other thing you said that really sort of struck a chord with me was how recently we're talking about it, and it's talking about it openly. Because I knew from day one as a student, there were people who I should not be by myself with. Oh, from day one. They were famous for being absolute douches, and I stand by that. And then that never changed. And I think what was really interesting was the way that was managed, that kind of like making people aware off the record, was considered management of that issue. And it never in any way challenged them. It never confronted them about their behavior. It's like all young, particularly young women, had to just run this gauntlet. And if you were lucky, you got to the end of it relatively unscathed. And I look back on that now and I'm so appalled, because I can't believe that we we allowed it to happen. But I guess, and it sounds really silly to say didn't know any better, because I mean we must have done, maybe. But I'm thinking about the 90s now, and that was very much the case. Everybody knew who was predatory, and everybody just managed it somehow instead of confronting it. So I think that's changed.
I think it still goes on. So through our work, we know there's lots of issues in terms of reporting. A big one being that the reporting processes that are there at the moment, either no one knows about them, there aren't any, or they're not fit for purpose. And we're doing a lot of work alongside NHS England in order to bring about psychologically safe, anonymous ways of reporting these issues. Essentially it's whistleblowing, and there's still quite a lot of hesitancy, because there's a lot of fear around doing that for people as individuals, but also for people's careers. Everyone that works in healthcare is highly qualified, skilled people. They go into healthcare because they care for people and they want to make things better. But because of the pressures of everything that we're under, it's very difficult to raise your head up and speak out. And also because we know that most of the perpetrators out there are consultants or matrons high up in those hierarchies. They getting rid of them or putting them on gardening leave is very expensive, for costs, for services, etc. So when a report does get made for something to be done, it's not happening. It's not happening often enough, and we're hearing that time and time again through stories, and that's a real, it's awful. It's awful. We don't look after each other enough. Which, yeah, so it's just horrendous, but we're hoping to change things. As I say, we're talking with NHS England. They're bringing in a gold standard framework for all of this, hopefully in the next few months. So things are changing, things are happening. I don't think it will fix things overnight, because this is a cultural problem, and culture is the hardest thing to change, but it will make things better. And that's, that's something to aim for.
And I don't know if this is true for your discipline, but in mental health, sometimes there's not an excusing of bad behaviour, but a toleration of more extreme behaviour if you're under pressure. So if you've had a really bad shift and everyone goes out on the lash together and your mistakes happen, but it's the pressure of the job, it's the tension of the job, that kind of stuff. So I was always aware of that being slightly different to some other fields. I think, if you're under pressure, you get a pass somehow. And the other thing I think that it makes me think about is stuff that's much muddier. So maybe the way that sort of we're talking about in terms of sexual harassment and things like that just looks different sometimes. So I can think of relationships had very asymmetric power dynamics that at the time I didn't consider to be problematic. But now, as an old lady, I'm like, oh no, oh no, that's not okay. And I think that's going to be complicated to iron out, because we do work in very hierarchically structured environments, and often people meet their partners at work or their relationships at work because we're doing such weird hours. You don't meet anybody else, so it's an interesting one. Is there anything that's come up around the type of work that we do, or the type of relationships that are okay and not okay now?
So we were in a roundtable event with who was it? The Working Party for Sexual Misconduct in Surgery. So they're the group that did the surgical report back in September last year. So the headline news being that 1 in 3 female surgeons have been sexually assaulted at work by a colleague. So they did that report, and we went to a roundtable there, and there was a lot of discussion in terms of because you can't stop consenting adults having a relationship. You can't. But what you can do is you can put in safeguarding in terms of ensuring that an educational supervisor and their trainee, if they are in a relationship, that professional relationship needs to be dissolved and moved on to other people, so that there's no threat to that junior staff member's career trajectory. Not saying that would happen, but it could. And it's making sure that things that could happen that are detrimental to individuals are stopped as much as they can, really.
And you must have these sorts of conversations and the type of work that you're involved in all the time, and have this, and because you rightly say it can be really depressing, it can be really difficult, it can be really upsetting. How do you protect yourself and put in kind of safeguards for people who are maybe attending your sessions or coming to your website? What sort of safety measures do you employ?
Yeah, so in terms of the audience that whenever we go and deliver talks, so we do those virtually and we do them in person. We always offer a trigger warning and say, this is what we're talking about. We're going to be touching on real life stories here. If there's anything that's too close to home, people can excuse themselves, they can leave altogether, or they can go and come back. We always hang around a bit at the end. Becky and myself, everything that we do in person, we do together, so that we can ask questions, offer support, signpost to appropriate support services. Similarly, when we do things online, we do that as part of our talks, but also we have a website where there are some signposts to resources on there. We're in the process of trying to set up a peer support community, probably going to be through a kind of Facebook group type platform, so that there's some others just just that kind of camaraderie that you
Yeah.
need sometimes.
Yeah.
And in terms of my own kind of personal mental health and Becky's, like, so Becky and I, we read every submission that comes in,
Yeah.
and we, as I alluded to, we've got lived experience of this
Mm.
ourselves, so we can find that
Mm.
really hard
Yeah.
sometimes. We are a great team. We look after each other very, very well.
Mm.
We do have some volunteers, but primarily most of this is Becky and I in our free time. So we talk near enough every day, whether that just be a text or a phone call or a virtual meeting, just checking in, seeing how we are. And we're very good at, if one of us is going through something, then the other one will pick up the
Yeah.
slack and fill things in. And I think just that constant talking about things,
Mm.
mainly just checking in.
Mm.
But we both find surviving in scrubs and the work that we're doing,
Mm.
we're sort of channeling a lot of, I say we, I know that I definitely am, I probably shouldn't speak for Becky, but I'm challenging a lot of kind of my anger, my frustration,
Yeah.
my disappointment at the system into
Mm.
this. And that's giving, it gives me energy to then go out and keep doing this and keep, without being a bit cringe, but fighting the good fight and all, and all that kind of stuff. So
I think
yeah,
it's
so
really
that's sort
interesting.
of how we do that.
That bringing that thinking about the kind of emotions that something like this brings up. And I can remember, because obviously everybody has had a situation. I can remember when it happened to me, and I was probably about 25, 26, and I'd been working with a senior manager for 4 years and really liked him. You know, he was a good guy. He was a bit of a lad, as they say when they're covering up really inappropriate sexual relationships that keep happening. But, you know, it never happened to me. We were at work, it was not a problem. And then one day he put me up against a wall and just like put his tongue in my mouth. And it was so disappointing. I wasn't even angry. I was just properly disappointed about the whole thing. Like, really? Really? And it was only much later on that I actually thought, right. And I actually got that kind of anger for it. And I can imagine that the kind of worst part of it for people must be that being alone with something like that. Whereas I was one of a billion people that it happened to. I mean, we had like quite a little kind of gang of people we could talk to. What we didn't have was any structure to do anything about it. And I love the idea that bringing this into the open alongside proper reporting actually is going to connect something, because you can have all the kind of emotional processing and camaraderie and support that you can have. If you can't do anything about it, you're ultimately left really frustrated, and anger is the least of irresponsible way of responding to that. It's really challenging, and you're absolutely right. The idea that we do this to each other when we've already got tough jobs, it's just so depressing. What a waste of everybody's energy. So you say that you go out and you talk with people and you obviously have this website. What other things are you doing? Because it sounds to me like you're doing a lot. You know, I say free time,
Yes.
because I know you can't possibly have free time.
I've got no free
Like
time. I've got no free time. When I say free time,
yeah,
I mean the time that I'm not at work being paid.
sure. I
Um,
think we all guess
so
that.
yeah, so we what do we do? We do loads.
It sounds like
um
it.
so we've done, so the core is our website.
Mhm.
And alongside that, we're having to do kind of the social media to amplify what we're doing, which is a bit of a love-hate relationship.
Mm.
I like promoting what we're doing on there, but it's when you've got to make reels and stuff like that. I'm too old. I'm too old for TikTok.
You're not doing
But
TikTok dances, Chelsea. I'm shocked
oh
to hear
god,
that.
no, 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 no. Yeah. Absolutely not. I cannot dance for love nor money.
Yeah.
So we do virtual webinars
Yep.
where so we do that either to kind of conferences talking about what the issues are, raising
Mm.
awareness, but
Mm.
we also deliver educational content through webinars. So we offer training, and that can be, again, talking about what the issues are, but also what people can do. And that's either organisations or individuals. We talk about kind of bystander intervention training, first disclosure training, and how to support survivors. And we do that virtually, and we also deliver that in person in half-day and full-day workshops. And we're doing more and more of that now, which is great to see that people, you know, organizations, trusts, colleges want this to happen. They want this training for their managers, but their staff members as well. So that's a big bulk of what we do. I'm a very keen educationalist, so that's sort of like, that's the bit I really enjoy doing. And also then with the face-to-face stuff, when we do the workshops, etc., we're on the ground, and we're talking to people, and people come to talk to us, and it's really nice. It's really rewarding in that sense. So that's a lot of what we do. We also do a lot of advocacy. We're part of quite a lot of working groups. So we have a role with the domestic abuse and sexual violence working group at NHS England. So it's that group that are bringing in this sexual safety policy. They brought in the sexual safety charter last year. We have oh god, how many we're in a lot of working groups. So we have a lot of meetings. We try to push policy change. We've had quite a few meetings with the GMC. Like I say, tomorrow we've got a meeting with quite a few of the regulators. So I think that's the GMC, NMC, and other allied health profession governing bodies, and NHS Wales, Scotland. So a lot of that. We also do a lot with universities. So we've been to the Medical School Council. We're trying really hard actually to get links with nursing. We're finding it really difficult for them to have a meeting with us, to be honest. Even though we've met several high ups in person, we're still trying to nail them down for a meeting, because you know, nursing is the biggest sector in terms of the staff members in healthcare. And from our stories, we know that they are greatly affected by this, but there doesn't seem to be as much conversation happening there. And we'd like to hear more. So if there are any nurses listening out there, please do get in touch on our website, either submitting a story or telling us where to go, who to talk to, what we can do. So yeah, and then what other streams do we have? We do some research. So we did our report. Becky's the big research. She's the academic, so she's much smarter than me. And then we're trying to run support groups as well. So those are the main streams. So me and Becky do most of all those things. Becky is more of the research. I'm more of the social media stuff, which
no, I think we all feel your passion for social media.
I'm just not very good at it. And when you've got like,
I found you,
you've got so many other, when you've got so many other things to do, it ends up being at the bottom of the pile, unfortunately. But the way that the world works, you need to really prioritize it. But I've done better this year. So my New Year's resolution was to like give it a good crack. So it's getting better. And then we do have some volunteers kind of behind the scenes. They help kind of like with the odd thing here and there, but you know, it's voluntary, and people have very busy lives. So it's
interesting. Yes, you painted a picture of how incredibly important this is, and then how it's great that people are coming to the table, but the fact that it's been left to two people who are already fully employed, and this is not their job to do something about, is a little bit, I think, indicative of the very problem that you guys are raising here. So I mean, like,
that's just women's work, generally speaking, isn't it?
Hopefully we're on the cusp of a change, but only because people like you have made it happen, which I think everybody is going to be grateful for. Well, maybe not everybody, but the majority of people are going to be grateful for. But what can we do to change the way we work, just to make it safer, make it more pleasant, and just a place, because you don't want people to be hurt in places of healing, do you? That's not how we want it to work.
No. No, oh, I'm gonna steal that little phrase. I like that. You don't want to be people to be hurt in places of healing. I like that.
Free, have it.
Oh, that's a
Literally
snippet.
is the least I can do. So tell me, what can
I
we do
think,
different?
yeah, I think a big part of all of this, and it sounds really blasé, but I think people just need to have conversations about it. But not
Mm,
only talk about it, listen.
mm,
Um, really, really listen, because a lot of the behaviors and the attitudes and the issues that we talk about aren't dead obvious.
mm,
Everyone knows the line of sexual assault, and they know that that is wrong. Whether or not they
mm,
do those behaviors is a different conversation altogether, but people know
mm,
at that point that that is wrong.
mm,
The stuff that comes before sexual assault, so the
mm,
inappropriate comments, the
mm,
inappropriate jokes,
mm,
the like discrimination based on maternity, parental issues, caring issues, the things that mainly affect women,
mm,
those are more subtle. And because they're subtle, when people talk about them, call them out, highlight them,
mm.
they feel as though they're the ones making the fuss, making the problem.
Yeah.
But actually, talking about things, educating people who are perpetrating these behaviors. I'm not saying you sit them down and say the reason that what you just did was wrong and did it. You don't need to lecture them, but you can be like, that made me feel really uncomfortable.
Mm,
And a lot of people, whatever kind of side
mm,
of the side of this issue that you're on,
mm,
everyone needs to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, because the conversations that we're having are uncomfortable.
mm,
But there is no personal growth if you don't come out of your comfort zone.
mm.
um so I think that is the main thing that every single person can do, because we all talk to each other every
Yeah.
single day. I don't know if we all listen to each other every single day, but we can
No.
all do it.
I think not.
We can all
Yeah.
do it, and it makes a real big difference in terms of culture. And if you've got an open culture at work, then you can have open conversations.
Mm,
I think a lot of people think that we're calling for anyone who makes an off-color joke, that we're calling for them to be struck off their professional register and hung, drawn and quartered, but we're not.
no.
It's about education. It's about being better. It's not about being perfect. I'm not perfect. I know I might seem it, but I'm not. um,
You heard it here first, guys.
no one's perfect, and we talk about these things a lot of the time, but I'm a woman, yes, but I'm a woman of privilege. I'm white. I'm
Yeah.
what else am I? I'm white, I'm heterosexual, I'm married,
Mm,
I'm in a fairly all right-ish job. Like I've got privilege there. I don't know what it feels like to be a black woman. I don't know what it feels like to be a gay woman. I don't know
yeah.
that. And I can't speak for those characteristics,
Mm,
but I can do what I can for women
mm.
generally. Um
And we
and
all know what it's like to be an agency worker, to be somebody who
yeah,
may not be hired back if they do anything that makes them stand out or perceived to be difficult, or if the person who's
yeah,
harassing them is somebody who's actually on the person who makes a call to the agency to hire them, and it puts people in such a position of vulnerability that
yeah,
it's power misused, isn't it? Really badly misused. And I think when someone starts to misuse power in one part of their life, I would question all of the ways that they interact with more vulnerable people. And being most of our jobs is working with vulnerable people, I think that is absolutely key to how we practice, because you
yeah,
can't just be a beast in one part of your life, can you? You can't just be someone who misuses power or sees vulnerability as an opportunity in one tiny section and then not in any of the others. So I think
yeah,
it is a concern. And you look at how lots of the ways that we work, I think in nursing, you will often have like a ward diary hanging around with everybody's phone numbers in it, just in case you need to call someone to come in for a shift. So
mm,
anybody can get texted,
yeah.
anybody can get have their phone misused like that. And I know it's happened to me. I can't think of a single woman it hasn't happened to. And I think
Mm,
it there's a lot about some of this stuff is accidental for sure. Like you say about collar jokes and just people being silly or accident or just not realizing they're too close or doing things that are inappropriate. But I think the large proportion of it, there's a deliberateness about it, which makes it a real problem
Yeah.
because of the power stuff. So I think it's
Yeah.
really
And
interesting. Oh,
I was just going to say, you touched on it earlier on when you said that, you know, everyone knows someone that you can't be left alone with at work. And that's not one person abusing another person. That's one person abusing their power and therefore abusing multiple people that they come into contact with. And
definitely.
that's scary. That's
I
really
think so.
scary. Yeah.
And the other thing I find quite difficult is how people who speak up are treated, because I can't think of a single time when a woman has come forward to report anything in any field and not been vilified for it. So the idea that we could get some way of reporting that didn't leave people open. I mean, even think about stuff like, I'm trying to think who's the most famous people, someone like Monica Lewinsky. She was like, she was in her early 20s and he was the president, and everyone's like, she is such a little hoe. And you're like, what are we even talking about? She's a temp worker. You know, what on earth? But that, you know, that pattern replicates itself time and time again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not a relationship. That's not a relationship. What are you talking about? You know, there's so much I think that we need to sort of start naming correctly, because so much has just slid by for so long. I think
Yeah.
it really does concern me. I think that we're coming so late to sorting this out, but thank goodness we are. Dave, I appreciate that you've been sat in uncomfortable silence for 37 minutes. Is there anything you wanted to add? Just asking.
I wouldn't say it was uncomfortable, Nicky. As always, it's always good to listen to the conversation, and I think in some conversations, you know, it's really important as a privileged white man to sit back and listen, you know, because ultimately, you know, that's one of the great things about MHTV. It's about giving voices to people that often don't have the opportunity to use it. Obviously, not talking about Chelsea there, because she's done an amazing job at, you know, using her voice and the voice of colleagues and friends to really advocate for women on this really important issue. So, you know, huge congratulations to all the work that you've done so far, and I'm sure there's much more to come. Just thinking about a few of the themes that have come up tonight. One of them is maybe one of, not the answer, but one of the areas that I would hope is supported on this issue is, you know, having strong trade unions. And I think that you've got to emphasise the fact that it's got to be strong trade unions in healthcare that are rooted in women being senior in those organisations. You know, it shouldn't be kind of the classic male trade unions that just talk about the issues that are important to male workers. You know, this is one where, you know, hopefully there is that important place for that voice. And especially, you know, like you're saying, Chelsea, some of the foundations of the work was your involvement with the BMA. So, you know, that's really good to hear. I think one of the questions that I maybe wanted to ask you is, you know, how can someone be a strong ally, you know, that, you know, isn't suffering this abuse themselves, but is aware of it? You know, what can they do to really kind of be a strong friend and ally?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that anyone can and everyone should do is educate themselves about these issues. There's so much out there in terms of, you know, you don't even need to read about it now. It's all on social media. Obviously, check your sources. But there are so many informative videos, people that speak about these issues online. As part of my social media campaign, we do put some educational stuff on there as well. And we've actually, I say just the last kind of educational post I put on was about bystander intervention. So if you witness things at work, there's tools and ways that you can, well, not even at work, just generally in life, there's tools and ways that you can intervene that keep you and the person being harassed safe. So you can just interrupt the conversation in not in a rude way, but just be like, sorry, can you just come and help me with this patient if you're at work? So you've completely intervened in that situation in a non-threatening way, but it's just taken that person out of that, you know, position of danger. You can oh gosh, I can't remember them all now. you can get someone else to interrupt on your behalf, or get someone to take that person out of the way in your behalf. That might be if you're more junior and you've got someone who's a bit more senior on site to help with that. You can document what's going on at the time, either write it down. If you are out and about, not on wards, you can take videos. The caveat there being you then need to check in with that victim and see what they want you to do with that. And if they want you to delete it, then that is what you do. You don't ever share them on the internet. It's a shame that I've got to say that, but I do. But that can be used if they then want to report things formally. But it also just makes them aware of the fact that what they've been through wasn't okay. A lot of people that have gone through harassment or sexism, misogyny, or assault even don't realize that that's what it is at the time. One of the kind of hazards of doing this work is that every time that we go and we talk to audiences and audiences open up and tell us about their experiences, it makes me think, oh yeah, I was harassed X amount of years ago. Oh, I was assaulted X amount of years ago. But just validating those experiences at the time and those feelings of like not knowing, you know, is a real big help. And then if they want to either speak to someone, raise a formal or an informal complaint, just helping them through that. Either by just being a bit of a sounding board or potentially going with them to make the report. Because it's then, if you've seen something, it's 2 against 1 rather than 1-on-1. And that he said, she said argument that we see time and time again when it comes to reporting processes is it's not valid in that instance. So there's loads of things you can do. And again, just going back to talking and listening about these things and being aware of what is going on around you, because I think that's actually quite hard to do.
Yeah. Particularly when everyone's working hard, isn't it? And you've just got the tunnel vision, just task. Oh,
yeah,
I think the go on.
I was just going to say, we're all busy, aren't we? We are all really busy. It's really hard. And we're under so much pressure wherever in healthcare that we're working, particularly at the moment. But again, just doing a little bit is better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I think the issue of education is really interesting, and certainly one of the things that I've reflected on as part of this discussion is when I was in health visiting, having education around domestic abuse, and there was a really good program developed by someone called Pat Craven, where she looked at working with perpetrators of domestic abuse and putting a lot of effort into kind of sort of talking about what is a really bad partner and what is a really good partner, and kind of talking about the kind of the behaviors that people have that people might assume are okay, but actually they're quite destructive. And not only can it be helpful for perpetrators, even though it can be quite dangerous to do with perpetrators, to kind of teach them how to not have those behaviors, it can also be really important for people who are experiencing abuse to kind of realize that that isn't a normal relationship and it shouldn't be expected, and it should be something that is called out and ultimately prosecuted against. One of the things that I think important to say as well is you mentioned the regulators and you got your meeting with them tomorrow. The NMC have just launched a new piece of work. It's called the NMC, the Strengthened Decision-Making Guidance on Concerns Outside of Professional Practice. So that's specifically for nurses that have engaged in, abusive behaviours outside of work, and how that needs to be considered in terms of the regulated practice. And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? That if nurses are, involved in abusing people, then it doesn't matter that it's not happening to a patient. If it's happening to someone else, it needs to be, investigated and dealt with. So I think, that's really positive. And certainly from a personal perspective, I've had about 12 professional cases to deal with for the HCPC and the NMC over the last month. And I think 2 or 3 of them were about sexual abuse, and registrants engaging in abuse or having to be, victims of sexual abuse. So really important stuff. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention is the NHS staff survey last year. They've actually updated some of the questions specifically on this issue. So probably another sort of result of your campaigning, where
We
they're
wrote
actually
them.
now asking in the staff survey. Yeah, so to ask those questions, and I know organisations are now having to look at their own results, over these few weeks. So hopefully, it's a good opportunity for them to really look inward and consider how they can do things. So again, credit to you guys for getting that as well.
Thank you.
That was my thinking, Nicky.
Yeah, I see that.
just to quickly touch on the staff survey. Yeah, we're pretty chuffed that we got those questions in there. We have found that the numbers that have been reported, oh God, I can't remember them. They were single figure anyway. I think we think they're much lower than what is actually going on. And we know from the surgical report that there is not very much trust in the big organizations, NHS England, the GMC, and certain royal colleges in terms of doing anything about it, but also there's not much trust in reporting to them. So we think that's got a part to play in why the numbers are so low, but also the fact that it is all the trust, you can tell which trusts have got, you're reporting on your trust. So even though it's meant to be anonymous, there is still that worry that you kind of sort of might be found out for being the one that's reported these issues. So we think those have got a part to play in why the numbers are so low. But hopefully these questions are here to stay in the survey, and then we can hopefully see over the next few years some kind of pattern. We would hope, it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but we'd hope that the numbers did get worse, because it means that people are feeling more comfortable to talk about what's happened to them, to report what's happened to them. So we'd expect it to get worse, and then hopefully it then will get better. Over what time frame that is, I wouldn't be able to say. It obviously depends on what kind of interventions come into play. But it's a good first step. And that's it. We're not gonna change this overnight. All these little steps are adding up to a monumental change, and that's all good.
So what does the future hold for the project now?
For us at Surviving in Scrubs. Yeah, so we are continuing to develop our educational content, our workshops, both in person. We are in the process of organising some webinars, so some free webinars to just kind of, again, highlight these issues, talk to key figures in these discussions. So that's hopefully going to be coming towards the end of this year, maybe from summer onwards, about one. I think we're planning on one a month, but we'll see how that goes. And then, so education. We've got some ideas for some more research projects. And then we're going to see, we've got a few meetings coming up over these next couple of weeks, and we're going to sort of get those done and then have a big think about what our kind of next advocacy campaign is going to be. So if anyone's got anything that they can think of or want to let us know, feel free to get in touch and help us out with some ideas. But yeah, a lot of the same, which is just a lot of busyness.
Yeah. I think we're coming to the end, aren't we? Because we've really talked for a long time, actually, unexpectedly. I wonder if there's anything that you wanted to sort of leave the audience with, any thoughts, anything like that before we finish up?
I'd ask anyone who's had any form of experience of sexism, misogyny, sexual harassment, or sexual assault at work to please submit a story to our website. It's anonymous. It is anonymous. We do ask if you feel comfortable to tell us where it happened, what specialty you're in, and what your job role is. We don't publish that. And we like I said earlier, we read every single story and we take out identifiable information to make them as anonymous as possible. But the more stories we have, the wider the kind of population that they come from, whether that be geographically or specialty, the more power that we have to say to regulators, NHS England, employers, what are you doing about this? So, that's, and we're very thankful for everyone that has submitted a story so far, because actually we do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Writing what's happened to you down in black and white, peach and black, actually, because that's the colour scheme of our website, is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. It can be really hard. A lot of people haven't put assault, they haven't said the word. So we're very thankful of that. And it's I know Becky and I are the faces of this campaign, the face of this organisation, but it's not our stories that are changing it, it's everyone else's. You know, we have to be very guarded and protected in what we share, because we are still practicing, we are still working, and we're still working in areas that we've worked in for a long time. So we will bump into people that have, you know, perpetrated these behaviours to us. We do share snippets here and there, but it's the collective narrative. It's the fact that this isn't just a two women problem. This is a every person in healthcare problem, because even though we do know from the data that it is vastly majority women that are victims, sorry, I should say, we do know that, you know, it does happen to men as well.
Yeah.
We know from the data that the perpetrators are vastly men. But it's an issue that affects everyone. It has a ripple effect, not only on the individuals and the workforce around them, but the greater, you know, the greater organisation. The cost in staff leave, in sickness, in them needing to use healthcare in order to get themselves mentally better after trauma. You know, that it's just a huge cost, as well as the trauma to the individuals. It's massive.
I think that's a good place for us to stop. So there's been lots of information tweeted out, along with places and things that you can do if you need help or support, if this has been something that's been painful for you personally. We're going to be off for the next 2 weeks because of Easter. And we're coming back with quality improvement work, which would be good. So, and that's what I think, you know, in part this is, you know, you can't have a good quality care if people who are given the care aren't safe. So I just want to thank our guests so much for the work they do. So thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.
Thanks, bye.